In January of 1994, Michael Jackson, the most famous human being on the planet, wired $23 million to make a lawsuit disappear. The world watched, the world decided, guilty men pay, innocent men fight. What the world didn't know, what almost no one ever told, is that the boy at the center of that lawsuit had already told investigators the truth. And the truth was, Michael Jackson never touched him. The boy's name was Jordan Chandler. He was 13 years old. And the person who put him in that room, who put those words in his mouth, who aimed him like a loaded weapon at the man he loved most in the world, was his own father. This is not the story you think you know. To understand what happened, you have to understand what Michael Jackson was in 1992. Not famous, not iconic. Those words are too small. Michael Jackson was the center of gravity of popular culture. Every record he released broke the one before it. Every tour he announced sold out before the tickets finished printing. He had been performing since before most of his fans were born, since he was a child in Gary, Indiana, singing on stages while other kids were learning to ride bikes. He never had a childhood. That part matters. It matters more than most people realize. The Jackson family machine consumed him young. Rehearsals, recordings, performances, contracts. His father, Joe Jackson, ran the family like a business, and Michael was the most valuable asset. By the time he was old enough to make his own decisions, the childhood he never had become a permanent absence, something he carried. And so, as an adult, in a way that confused the press and unsettled the public, Michael Jackson sought out the lightness he'd been denied. He built Neverland Ranch in the Santa Ynez Valley, a private amusement park, a zoo, a movie theater, a place designed to feel like the childhood he never lived. He surrounded himself with children, not in secret, openly, publicly, with the full knowledge of their parents. He said they made him feel something the adult world couldn't. The press called it strange. The children called it magic. Jordan Chandler called it the best thing that had ever happened to him.
It's egg hunt day.
Yeah.
And we're going, how many eggs are there?
45.
How many?
45.
45.
Yeah.
We're looking for 45 eggs.
And there'll be special prizes.
Do we get prizes?
Yeah. Well, I hope
A trip to Bermuda.
Yeah.
Jordy, to anyone who knew him, was 12 years old in May of 1992. He lived with his mother, June, and his stepfather, Dave Schwartz, in Los Angeles. His biological father, Evan Chandler, was a dentist in Beverly Hills, present enough to maintain custody arrangements, absent in every way that mattered. Jordy was a normal kid, video games, movies, music, and like millions of other children on every continent on Earth, he was completely, unreservedly in love with Michael Jackson. Posters on the wall, albums memorized front to back, the moonwalk practiced in the hallway when he thought no one was watching. Then, one afternoon in May, Michael Jackson's car broke down. The rental company Dave Schwartz managed happened to be the closest option. Michael walked through the door. David, who knew exactly how obsessed his stepson was, called June immediately. Bring Jordy, now. He offered Michael a free car. In exchange, one phone call to the kid. Michael smiled and agreed. Jordy was nervous in the car on the way over, that kind of nervous that lives somewhere between joy and terror, when something you've dreamed about is suddenly about to be real. He walked into the rental office, and Michael Jackson was standing there. No makeup, no costume, just a man, and he smiled at him. They talked, they exchanged numbers. At the end of that afternoon, Jordy Chandler had not just met Michael Jackson, he had made a friend. Michael kept his word and he called, then called again and again. The calls stretched to hours, Michael asking about school, Jordy talking about his favorite games, the two of them laughing about nothing in particular. June answered the phone sometimes and couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. The most famous man in the world was calling her house to talk to her son about Sonic the Hedgehog. Then came the visits to Neverland. Then came the trips, concert tours, hotel suites, the full orbit of Michael Jackson's extraordinary life. June and David came along. The whole family was absorbed into Michael's world, genuinely and warmly. He trusted them in ways he trusted almost no one. At Neverland, he moved without makeup, his vitiligo visible, the illness that had transformed his appearance exposed without apology. That was not something the outside world got to see. Jordy understood, in the way 12-year-olds understand things, that this was rare, that this was real. Then Evan Chandler found out. Evan had heard about the friendship. It was hard to miss. given the photographs of his son and Michael Jackson were appearing in the tabloids. He called June. He arranged to spend time with Jordy on his custody days. He did something he had rarely done before. He showed up. He showed up because he wanted access to Michael Jackson. Evan Chandler was a Beverly Hills dentist with a specific kind of ambition, the kind that lives just below the surface of a person and never quite quiets down. He had written a screenplay once. It had been produced briefly into a low-budget comedy that went nowhere. He wanted more. He wanted money, recognition, a real foothold in the entertainment world he brushed against daily through his celebrity clientele, but could never quite enter. And now his son, the son he had barely prioritized, was the closest person in the world to the most famous entertainer alive. Evan Chandler introduced himself to Michael. Michael, who was warm and trusting and always had been, welcomed him. Evan came to Neverland. Evan treated Michael as a dental patient. Evan administered injections for pain when Michael asked. The level of access was extraordinary, and then Evan started asking for things. First came the request for a new bedroom, a dedicated space built into his house, somewhere Michael could stay comfortably when he visited Jordy. Michael said no. Then came the ask for an entirely new house. Michael said no again. Then came the screenplay, one of Evan's scripts, already written, needing only someone with money and connections to bring it to life. Michael passed. And then came the biggest ask of all, a production company, bankrolled by Michael, run by Evan, built to turn every script Evan would ever write into a film. Michael said no to that too. 4 requests, 4 rejections. And with each one, something shifted in Evan Chandler. Something that had nothing to do with his son and everything to do with what he had decided his son was worth to him. By this point, Michael had understood something about Evan Chandler. He began to distance himself, not dramatically, not with a confrontation, quietly, slowly. The calls became less frequent, the invitations more rare. Evan noticed, and Evan did not take it well. What he did next would destroy 2 people, one of whom was his own son. In July of 1993, Evan Chandler made a phone call to Dave Schwartz, Jordy's stepfather, the man who had first brought the family into Michael's world. He didn't know David was recording. Michael had suspected Evan's intentions for months. He had quietly advised the people around him to document any contact from him. David had followed that instruction. What Evan said on that call was not the voice of a concerned father. It was the voice of a man announcing a plan he had already decided on. He said he had everything in place. He said he was going to make a great deal of money. He said Michael had made an enemy, and enemies paid.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record.
David kept his voice calm. He let Evan talk. At some point he asked about Jordy, about how the boy would be affected by whatever came next. Evan's answer was that it didn't matter. His 13-year-old son was irrelevant to the outcome.
I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed. June is going to lose Jordy. She will have no right to ever see him again.
Yeah.
That's a fact, Dave. That's what's
Does that help?
Michael's career will be over.
Does that help Jordy?
Michael's career will be over.
And does that help Jordy?
That's irrelevant to me.
The recording existed. The intentions were documented. And still, Evan moved forward. He retained an attorney. The attorney approached Michael with a proposal, $20 million, paid to Evan in exchange for silence. If Michael refused, Evan would go public with allegations that Michael had done something unforgivable to his son. Michael refused. What Evan was claiming had never happened, he said. There was nothing to pay for. Evan went to the police. Within days, the story was everywhere. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, the most beloved entertainer in history, was facing the kind of allegation that destroys a person before a single fact is established. Every tabloid, every news program, every radio station, every person with an opinion and a microphone, the verdict in the court of public attention was delivered before a single document had been reviewed. What was happening to Jordy Chandler during all of this? He was watching. He had been kept from his mother since shortly after Evan made his move. Evan had decided that June's household, where the friendship with Michael had been permitted to grow, was a liability. Jordy lived with his father now, not by choice, by the arrangement his father had engineered. He watched the news coverage alone. He watched the police raid Neverland on television, officers in every room, cameras recording every corner of the place that had felt like the most magical location on earth. He knew what those investigators would find. Nothing, because there was nothing to find. He felt something close to shame, not for himself, but for Michael, who he knew was intensely private about his appearance, who had trusted this family enough to let them see him without the armor he wore everywhere else, was now being documented without his consent. Every detail recorded, every layer of privacy stripped away. Jordan knew what Michael's face would look like. He knew how it would break him. Then, the investigators came for Jordy. They questioned him for hours. Specific questions. Clinical questions. Relentless. He was 13 years old. He told them the truth. Nothing had happened. Michael was his friend. Michael was kind. Michael was safe. The investigation did not stop. In August of 1993, Evan Chandler brought Jordy to his dental office. The reason was ordinary. A baby tooth that hadn't fallen out on its own. A routine procedure. Nothing Jordy would have thought twice about. His father was a dentist. Of course his father would take care of it. During the procedure, Evan administered sodium amytal. Sodium amytal was used in dentistry at the time. It reduces anxiety. It sedates. But it has another property that is well documented in the medical literature. It makes the person receiving it highly suggestible. Under its influence, memories can be implanted, statements can be shaped. A person in that state can be guided toward conclusions they would never reach on their own. When the procedure was finished, Evan did not take Jordy home. He took him directly to a psychiatrist. Under sedation, confused, lowered defenses, susceptible in a way he had no language for, and no ability to resist, Jordy was questioned again about Michael Jackson, about Neverland, about what had happened between them, and this time, the account changed. The psychiatrist documented the session. The documentation went to Evan's attorney. The attorney delivered it to Michael's legal team with a revised demand, $23 million, or criminal charges would follow. Michael refused again. Evan Chandler went to the police again, this time with the psychiatric documentation. What followed was the most public dismantling of a human being in the history of celebrity. Michael Jackson, who had spent his entire life building something extraordinary, watched it begin to crack under the weight of a story that his best friend, a 13-year-old boy who loved him, had been chemically induced to tell. Jordy didn't understand what had happened to him in that office. He was a child. He knew something was wrong with his memory. He knew the things he was now saying didn't feel like his own. But he was 13, surrounded by adults who had decided what the story was, and he had no framework to name what had been done to him. He was questioned again by police, by prosecutors, by psychiatrists, by lawyers. Each session extracted what the adults in the room wanted extracted. He felt his father's hand behind every question. He felt the pressure of it, the unspoken instruction that the answers had to be what they needed to be, or something terrible would happen, and the fault would be his. He was 5 months from his 14th birthday. He had not seen his mother in months. He had not spoken to Michael since the investigation began. He had never felt more alone in his life. For 5 months, that was Jordy's life. His father on one side, investigators on the other, and the press everywhere else. He watched his name appear in headlines daily. He watched people he had never met form absolute opinions about something they knew nothing about. He was 13, then 14, and no one in that house was asking how he was doing, only what he remembered, what he would say, what he was willing to testify to. He missed his mother. He missed Neverland. He missed the version of his life that had existed before his father decided what it was worth. According to Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, Jordan did reach out to Michael during this period. He called. He told Michael he was sorry. And Michael, who had every reason to be angry, asked him one question. Why wouldn't he just tell the truth publicly? Why not say on camera what he had already told the investigators? Jordan's answer was 3 words. My father would kill me.
But Jordan Chandler his son knew that it wasn't true. So he came to Michael and told him, Michael, I'm sorry, what's going on? I know it's not true. So Michael told him, so why don't you go and get on in the news and tell them so people wouldn't think this terrible thing about me? But he said, I can't do that. If I did that, my father would kill me.
In January of 1994, 15 days after Jordan Chandler turned 14, Michael Jackson settled the civil lawsuit. $23 million. The world interpreted it the only way a settlement of that size could be interpreted, as admission. Innocent men don't pay, guilty men pay to make problems go away. The reality was more complicated and more painful. Michael did not want to settle. He wanted to fight. He wanted to stand in front of a jury and say what was true. But the civil case was proceeding alongside a criminal investigation, and his legal team advised him that testifying in the civil proceeding would expose him in the criminal one. He was trapped. Evan Chandler took the money. He took the money and immediately told his son that there was still a criminal case to survive. Jordy would have to testify, again, against Michael, in a criminal proceeding where the stakes were not millions of dollars, but years of a man's life. That was the moment something broke in Jordan Chandler. He refused. He refused to testify in the criminal case. He had given investigators everything they were going to get. He would not do it again. He would not stand in front of a court and perform the story his father had constructed one more time. Without the testimony of the alleged victim, the criminal case collapsed. Charges were not pursued. Michael Jackson was never indicted, never tried, never convicted. But the damage was not reversible. $23 million looked like guilt. The investigation looked like guilt. The headlines had already written the story, and the story had already entered the world, and nothing that followed would fully erase it. Jordy went back to living with his father, not because he chose it, because the court had decided it. He knew in the way he knew things now, with the cold clarity that replaced his childhood, that the $23 million had been deposited in a protected account in his name. He was the victim in the eyes of the law. The money was his. Evan wanted it. The conversation that followed, if conversation is the right word for what Evan Chandler did, ended with a 5.5 kilogram weight striking Jordan's head, pepper spray in his eyes, his father's hands around his throat for the money that Jordan wanted nothing to do with, from the lawsuit he had never wanted to exist against a man he had never stopped believing in. At 15 years old, Jordan Chandler petitioned the court for legal emancipation. He was granted it. He walked out of his father's house and did not look back. The years that followed were quiet, deliberately, carefully quiet. Jordan changed his name. He avoided cameras. He refused every interview request, every documentary invitation, every opportunity to make the story his, to monetize the attention, to own the narrative the world had built around him without his permission. He wanted none of it. He was trying to rebuild something, some version of a life that wasn't defined by 5 months in 1993, when he was 13 years old and his father had decided he was useful. The human memory is a strange and unreliable thing. It rewrites itself slowly, over years, as new information and new understanding layer over old experience. As Jordan grew older, as he accumulated the context that children don't have access to, he began to understand what had happened in his father's dental chair. He understood sodium amytal. He understood suggestibility. He understood the sequence of events, the rejected financial demands, the phone call David had recorded, the psychiatric appointment that followed immediately after the sedation, the way the account had changed in that one afternoon. He listened to the recording, his father's voice, calm and certain, describing the plan to destroy Michael Jackson, the mention of money, the question about Jordy, the answer that Jordy was irrelevant. In 2004, Jordan Chandler filed a lawsuit against his father for the assault with the weight, the pepper spray, the hands around his throat. The weapon turned back toward the man who had aimed it. In 2005, when a new set of criminal charges was brought against Michael Jackson by an unrelated family, prosecutors contacted Jordan. They wanted him to testify, to contribute to the case against Michael. He refused again. He watched the trial. He watched Michael Jackson stand before a jury on 14 separate charges. He watched him be acquitted on every single one. It was not enough to give back what had been taken. The friendship was gone. The magical years at Neverland were contaminated beyond recovery. The image of Michael, that private, unmade version of him that only the people he truly trusted ever saw, had been replaced in the world's memory by something darker. On June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson died in Los Angeles. He was 50 years old. Jordan heard the news alone. What passed through him in that moment, no record tells us. The memories would have come all at once. The phone calls that lasted for hours, the first visit to Neverland, the feeling of being truly seen by someone extraordinary. And underneath those memories, the weight of everything that had been done with them. 4 months after Michael's death, Evan Chandler took his own life. Jordan did not attend the funeral. He is 46 years old now. He lives under a name the public doesn't know. He has never written a book about what happened, never given an interview, never appeared in a documentary, never attempted to profit from the story his father built around him. According to people who have been close to him, he eventually came to understand clearly, fully, without ambiguity, what his father had done, what had been taken from him, what had been taken from Michael. He chose silence, not as surrender, as the only form of dignity that was still entirely his. Somewhere out there, Jordan Chandler is living a life that has nothing to do with 1993, and Michael Jackson's name is still said every day, in arguments, in documentaries, in comment sections, in classrooms, by people who are absolutely certain they know what happened. The boy who was at the center of all of it said nothing. Maybe that's the most honest answer anyone gave. Somewhere a man no one would recognize still remembers being called Applehead And maybe that memory, the one the world never got to touch, was the only thing worth protecting. What do you think really happened, and does it change how you see Michael Jackson? Leave it in the comments. Every take is worth hearing on this one. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. There's always another one worth telling.